The cold bit through Ellie's threadbare coat as she hurried through the crowded mall, trying to remain invisible. December in Chicago showed no mercy to anyone, especially not to those who called the streets home. At 42, Ellie Morgan had mastered the art of blending in, just clean enough not to draw security's attention, just shabby enough that people's eyes slid past her like she was part of the architecture. Today, though, she had a purpose: finding her daughter, Lily. Somewhere in this gleaming temple of consumption, Lily worked at a coffee shop. 3 years had passed since their last encounter, a screaming match outside a rehab center where Ellie had promised to get clean, a promise she'd broken within 48 hours. She'd lost track of her daughter after that, until yesterday when she'd overheard 2 baristas at the shelter mentioning a manager named Lily at the mall's newest coffee spot. The information had ignited something in Ellie's chest that she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "Keep moving, ma'am." A security guard's stern voice interrupted her thoughts. She nodded apologetically, clutching her small backpack tighter. Inside was everything she owned: a change of clothes, a tattered notebook filled with unsent letters to her daughter, a water bottle, and 3742, her entire worldly wealth. 20 floors above the mall, Alexander Reed adjusted his bespoke Italian suit and frowned at his reflection. At 38, he was one of the youngest billionaires in the country, having built Reed Innovations from a dorm room project into a tech empire. Today's visit to the mall was purely ceremonial, cutting a ribbon at the opening of the Reed Innovation Center, a flashy tech showroom meant to dazzle consumers and impress shareholders. "5 minutes, Mr. Reed." His assistant, Vanessa, appeared in the doorway of the private suite the mall had provided. "The press is assembled downstairs." "Has Diane arrived?" he asked, referring to his fiancée of 8 months, a relationship his board of directors had enthusiastically endorsed. The daughter of their largest investor, Diane Whitcomb, was beautiful, sophisticated, and as passionate about their upcoming marriage as she might be about selecting a new handbag. "Ms. Whitcomb sends her regrets. Her flight from Paris was delayed. She'll join you at the gala tonight." Alexander nodded, unsurprised. Their relationship operated like a well-oiled business arrangement, each appearance together carefully scheduled and executed. He sometimes wondered when exactly his life had become so empty of spontaneity, of genuine connection. When had he last felt anything real? The board meeting is scheduled for 3 p.m. following the ribbon cutting. The quarterly projections— "I know, Vanessa." He cut her off, suddenly weary of the endless obligations that filled his calendar. "Let's get this over with." As Alexander's private elevator descended toward the main atrium, Ellie was getting desperate. She'd circled the food court twice with no sign of a coffee shop that might employ her daughter. Security was beginning to take notice of her, and the lunch crowd had thickened, making it harder to move inconspicuously. She spotted another uniformed guard speaking into his radio while looking in her direction. Panic fluttered in her chest. Being kicked out now would mean another day in the cold, another day without finding Lily. She quickened her pace, head down, and rounded a corner directly into a forming crowd. Camera flashes popped as a line of important-looking people in suits emerged from an elevator. Ellie tried to backtrack, but the crowd pressed forward, trapping her. A reporter bumped into her, sending her stumbling forward just as the elevator doors opened. Alexander stepped out, plastering on the practiced smile he reserved for public appearances. The crowd surged, cameras flashed, and suddenly there was a commotion at the front. Security moved toward the disturbance, but not before a thin, disheveled woman was propelled directly into his path. For Ellie, the moment was pure instinct. Thrown off balance, she reached out to steady herself and found her arms wrapping around a tall man in an expensive suit. The embrace lasted only seconds before security intervened. But in that brief moment, something extraordinary happened. Alexander felt thin arms encircle him, not the air-kiss greeting of socialites or the calculated handshakes of business associates, but a genuine, if accidental, human embrace. In that fleeting connection, he felt the woman's heartbeat, rapid with fear, the slight tremble in her limbs from cold or hunger or both. He smelled not perfume, but the raw, unfiltered scent of humanity, of struggle and survival. And then she was being pulled away, her eyes wide with mortification as security guards gripped her arms. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean, I was pushed." Alexander found himself staring into eyes the color of faded denim, set in a face that had once been beautiful before hardship had carved its indelible marks. Those eyes held no pretense, no agenda, just naked human emotion, fear, embarrassment, and a flicker of defiance. "It's all right," he heard himself say, raising a hand to halt the guards. "Let her go." The security team hesitated, glancing at each other. "Sir, we have protocols for these situations." "I said let her go." His voice carried the unquestionable authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. The guards released Ellie's arms and she stumbled back, rubbing her wrists. The crowd was watching, reporters scribbling notes, cameras still flashing. His PR team would have a fit, but Alexander couldn't bring himself to care. Something had awakened in him during that brief, accidental embrace, something he'd thought long dead. "What's your name?" he asked, ignoring the murmurs of the crowd. "Ellie," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Ellie Morgan." A voice in the back of his mind, the voice that had built his empire through calculated decisions and risk assessments, screamed that this was madness. Yet he couldn't look away from those eyes, couldn't step back into the script of his carefully orchestrated life. "Mr. Reed, we should proceed with the ceremony," Vanessa urged from behind him, her voice tight with concern. "Cancel it," he said, not taking his eyes off Ellie. What?" Vanessa faltered, an unprecedented occurrence in their 5 years of working together. "Cancel everything. The ribbon cutting, the board meeting, all of it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, retrieving a business card. He handed it to Ellie, who took it with trembling fingers. "Meet me here in 2 hours." The address was for an upscale restaurant near the lakefront, the kind of place that would never admit someone in Ellie's condition. She shook her head. "I can't. I'm looking for someone. My daughter." "Then I'll help you find her," Alexander said, surprising himself as much as everyone around him. "But first, let's get you someplace warm. 2 hours." He turned to Vanessa, whose face had frozen in a mask of professional horror. "Call Arthur. Have him meet Ms. Morgan at the north entrance with appropriate attire. Make sure she's treated with respect." Before anyone could object further, Alexander strode away from the dumbfounded crowd, bypassing the stage where the ribbon cutting was to take place. He headed for the mall exit, ignoring the calls of reporters and the frantic texts already lighting up his phone. Ellie stood rooted to the spot, the business card clutched in her hand as the crowd's attention turned to her. Security hovered uncertainly nearby, clearly conflicted about whether to remove her or escort her as their boss had implied. "Ma'am?" A different voice, gentler this time. Another assistant had approached her. "If you'll come with me, we'll get you ready to meet Mr. Reed." "But my daughter," Ellie protested weakly. "I came to find Lily." "We can help with that too," the young woman assured her. "Mr. Reed has resources. If your daughter is in Chicago, we can find her." Hope and suspicion warred within Ellie. In her experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it invariably was. Yet there had been something in that man's eyes, a recognition, a connection that had felt more real than anything she'd experienced in years. "Why would he help me?" she asked, voicing the question that hung in the air. The assistant smiled uncertainly. "I honestly don't know. I've worked for Mr. Reed for 3 years and I've never seen him do anything like this. But when he makes a decision, things happen." 2 floors below, in the mall's service corridors, Lily Morgan wiped down the espresso machine and tried to ignore the commotion she could hear from the atrium. Another celebrity appearance, another product launch, the constant spectacles that kept the mall filled with customers who would eventually trickle down to the coffee shop where she worked. At 25, Lily had fought her way up from barista to assistant manager, clawing her way towards stability after a childhood marked by her mother's addiction and their eventual separation. She didn't allow herself to think about her mother often, but sometimes, like today, Ellie's face would flash unbidden in her mind, leaving her wondering if she was even still alive. Meanwhile, Alexander sat in his car, parked in the VIP section of the mall garage, his driver waiting silently for instructions. His phone buzzed incessantly, calls from board members, from his PR team, from Diane. He ignored them all, staring instead at his own reflection in the tinted window. What the hell was he doing? One accidental embrace from a homeless woman, and he was upending his entire life? It was madness. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that had overwhelmed him in that moment, a feeling of connection, of authenticity that had been absent from his life for so long he'd forgotten it existed. In that brief, unplanned human contact, he'd felt more alive than he had in years of boardroom victories and red carpet appearances. The woman's eyes haunted him, not pleading or calculating, just nakedly human in a way no one in his rarefied world ever allowed themselves to be. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "Alexander, have you lost your mind?" His father's voice, sharp with disapproval. James Reed had retired as CEO 5 years ago, but still sat as chairman of the board. "I'm getting calls about you embracing a vagrant in the middle of the mall opening and then walking out on the ceremony. Please tell me this is some kind of publicity stunt." "It's not a stunt," Alexander replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Something happened, Dad. Something I can't explain yet. Whatever midlife crisis you're having, save it for after the quarter closes. The Whitcombs are furious. Diane is humiliated. You have responsibilities." "I know exactly what my responsibilities are," Alexander cut in. "I've fulfilled every one of them for 20 years. I've built Reed Innovations into what it is, doubled our market share, made everyone around me wealthy beyond their dreams. And what do I have to show for it? A fiancé who cares more about her Instagram followers than our relationship? A calendar full of meaningless appearances? A father who only calls when I've embarrassed the company?" Silence stretched between them. When James spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. "What's going on, Alex? This isn't like you." "Maybe that's the problem," Alexander replied softly. "Maybe I've been like me for so long that I've forgotten who I actually am." He ended the call and turned off his phone, then tapped on the partition. "Frank, take me to the peninsula. I need to change before my lunch appointment." As the car pulled away, Alexander found himself thinking about Ellie Morgan. Who was she? What series of circumstances had led her to homelessness? Who was the daughter she was searching for? Questions he would never have considered relevant before today now consumed his thoughts. For the first time in years, Alexander Reed felt the stirrings of genuine curiosity about another human being, not as a business prospect or a potential asset, but simply as a person with a story he wanted to understand. And in that curiosity, he felt something else awakening, something he'd thought buried beneath spreadsheets and strategic plans and relationship contracts. His humanity. Ellie sat stiffly in a plush chair at the high-end department store's personal shopping suite, convinced that at any moment someone would recognize this charade for what it was and throw her back onto the street. A woman named Claudia, with a tape measure draped around her neck and an expression that professionally masked her disdain, circled her with calculating eyes. "Mr. Reed said to provide a complete wardrobe," Claudia said, her voice carefully neutral. "Perhaps we should start with a shower in our executive facilities?" Though phrased as a suggestion, Ellie recognized an order when she heard one. She nodded, following Claudia through a door that led to a marble-tiled bathroom bigger than any apartment she'd lived in during the past decade. "Take your time," Claudia said, setting down a basket of luxurious toiletries. "I'll select some preliminary options while you freshen up." Alone in the bathroom, Ellie stared at her reflection in the oversized mirror. Stringy gray-streaked hair, hollowed cheeks, eyes that had seen too much hardship. What could a billionaire possibly want with her? The cynical voice of survival, the one that had kept her alive on the streets, whispered warnings of dangers, exploitation, unsavory expectations. Yet something about Alexander Reed's expression had silenced those warnings. In his eyes, she'd seen not predation or pity, but recognition, as if he'd seen something in her that resonated with something in himself. Under the hot spray of the shower, Ellie allowed herself a moment of pure physical pleasure. How long had it been since she'd felt truly clean? The shelter showers were always lukewarm at best, timed to prevent water waste, shared with dozens of others. This private cascade of steaming water felt like absolution. She scrubbed away years of grime, watching swirls of dirt disappear down the drain. If only the stains on her life could be so easily removed. The thoughts of Lily returned, her beautiful daughter, now a grown woman somewhere in this very mall. What would Lily think of this bizarre turn of events? Would she even recognize her mother beneath the dirt and desperation? When Ellie emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a plush robe, she found not only Claudia, but a small army of attendants waiting, along with racks of clothing in subdued, elegant styles. "Mr. Reed's assistant provided your sizes," Claudia explained, answering Ellie's unasked question. "Let's see what works, shall we?" The next hour passed in a blur of fabrics and fittings. Ellie, who hadn't worn anything but donated clothing for years, found herself dressed in a simple but exquisitely cut navy dress that somehow made her look dignified rather than desperate. A stylist trimmed and colored her hair, erasing the gray and bringing out natural highlights she'd forgotten existed. A makeup artist worked subtly, covering the worst ravages of outdoor living without attempting to disguise her age or the character in her face. As the final touches were completed, Ellie barely recognized the woman who looked back from the mirror. Beneath the layers of deprivation and despair, traces of her former self had re-emerged. Not the beauty she might have been without years of addiction and homelessness, but something perhaps more powerful. A woman with a visible history, with endurance etched into the lines of her face. "You look lovely," Claudia said with what seemed like genuine surprise. "The car is waiting whenever you're ready." Ellie gathered her courage. "Before I go, could you help me find someone? My daughter works at a coffee shop in this mall. Her name is Lily Morgan." Claudia hesitated, then nodded. "I'll make some inquiries while you're at lunch. The mall management office has a directory of all employees." "Thank you," Ellie whispered, overcome with a sudden surge of emotion. She clutched her old backpack, the one thing she'd refused to relinquish despite Claudia's thinly veiled horror. Inside were her letters to Lily, the only possessions that truly mattered. At the Peninsula Hotel's restaurant, Alexander sat at a private table overlooking the lake, second-guessing his impulsive decision with every passing minute. He'd changed into more casual attire, if a $10,000 sport coat over a simple black shirt could be called casual. His phone remained off, tucked into his jacket pocket, a temporary reprieve from the storm he knew was brewing in his professional and personal life. When Ellie entered the restaurant, he almost didn't recognize her. The transformation wasn't just in her appearance, though that was remarkable enough. There was a shift in how she carried herself, still cautious, but with a quiet dignity that the streets hadn't entirely stripped away. Alexander stood as she approached, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Ms. Morgan, thank you for coming." "I'm not sure I had much choice," she replied, settling carefully onto the chair as if afraid it might vanish beneath her. "Your people are very persuasive." A smile tugged at his lips. "They're efficient. It's why I pay them obscene amounts of money." He paused, studying her face. "You clean up well?" "So I've been told. Once upon a time." Her eyes, clearer now without the haze of fear and cold, met his directly. "Why am I here, Mr. Reed? What do you want from me?" The bluntness of her question caught him off guard. The people in his world danced around direct questions, preferring innuendo and implication. Ellie Morgan, it seemed, had no time for such games. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure," he admitted, surprising himself with his candor. When I crashed into you and made a spectacle of myself? When we connected, he corrected gently. Something happened in that moment. Something I haven't felt in a very long time. Ellie's expression turned wary. If this is heading in a direction I think it is… No, Alexander interrupted quickly. Nothing like that. This isn't… I'm engaged, for one thing. The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. It's not about romance or sex or anything like that. It's about… He struggled to articulate the feeling. Authenticity. Reality. Something genuine in a world that feels increasingly artificial. Ellie's posture relaxed slightly, though wariness remained in her eyes. So I'm what? A reality check? A charitable project? The poor homeless woman who reminded the rich man of his humanity? Her tone was sharp, but not bitter. Perhaps, he acknowledged. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just that when you held on to me, it was the first time in years someone has touched me without wanting something from me. The waiter appeared, preventing Ellie from responding. Alexander ordered for both of them, a decision that might have seemed presumptuous except that he chose simple, comforting dishes rather than the restaurant's more intimidating offerings. When they were alone again, Ellie leaned forward. I appreciate the clothes and the meal, but I need to find my daughter. That's why I was at the mall today. Tell me about her, Alexander said, genuine interest in his voice. The simple invitation broke something open in Ellie. Words poured out. About Lily's childhood, about Ellie's addiction, about their separation and her failed attempts at recovery. She spoke of her shame, her regrets, her desperate hope that her daughter might allow her back into her life, if only for a moment of closure. Alexander listened without interruption, without judgment. When she finished, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, he reached across the table and covered her hand with his, a gesture so simple and yet so foreign to his usual calculated interactions. We'll find her, he promised. I have resources, connections. If she works at the mall, we'll locate her today. Why would you do that for me? Ellie asked, the question that had been hovering between them since the moment in the mall. Alexander withdrew his hand, sitting back as their first course arrived. Because I can, he said simply. Because for the first time in longer than I can remember, I want to do something that isn't scheduled, approved, and aligned with quarterly projections. They ate in silence for a few moments before he continued. My life is mapped out in 15-minute increments. My relationships are strategic. Even my engagement is more merger than marriage. A bitter smile twisted his lips. I built an empire by seeing the world as a series of transactions and opportunities. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling anything real. Until a homeless woman gave you an awkward hug, Ellie finished for him, a hint of dry humor in her voice. Until then, he agreed with a genuine smile. Meanwhile, in the coffee shop on the mall's second level, Lily Morgan was dealing with the aftermath of the commotion upstairs. Customers streamed in, buzzing with gossip about the billionaire who'd abandoned his own ceremony after embracing a homeless woman. They say he just walked out, one regular customer told her while waiting for his latte. His PR people are in damage control mode. It's all over social media. Lily nodded politely, though her mind was elsewhere. The end-of-month inventory needed completion, and she was short-staffed today. The gossip about rich people's eccentricities hardly registered as important. The weird thing is, they're saying the homeless woman disappeared too, the customer continued. Whisked away in some private car. Maybe she's blackmailing him or something. This detail caught Lily's attention. What did she look like? The woman? The customer shrugged. I didn't see her myself. Someone said she was older, thin. You know how it is with the people who hang around the mall in winter. Lily's hand stilled on the espresso machine. There were dozens of homeless people who sought refuge in the mall during Chicago's brutal winters. It couldn't possibly be her mother. Yet something tugged at her consciousness. a feeling she couldn't quite name. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Is this Lily Morgan? My name is Claudia Davis from Executive Services at Nordstrom. I have information regarding your mother, Ellie Morgan. Please call at your convenience." The cup Lily was holding clattered to the counter, coffee splashing across the surface. Her coworker looked over in alarm. "Everything okay, Lily?" I need to take my break now," she managed, her voice distant to her own ears. "Cover for me? Just 15 minutes." Outside the shop, in a quiet corner of the mall corridor, Lily stared at the text message, her heart hammering. After 3 years of silence, after all the broken promises and disappearing acts, her mother had resurfaced and somehow connected with someone from Nordstrom's executive services? It made no sense. Her finger hovered over the call button. Part of her wanted to delete the message, to maintain the fragile peace she'd built in her life. Another part, the part that still woke sometimes from dreams of reconciliation, trembled with possibility. Back at the restaurant, Ellie's phone, a new model provided along with her makeover, chimed with a message. She glanced at it, then looked up at Alexander with wide eyes. "They found her," she whispered. "They found Lily." Alexander nodded, unsurprised. "Do you want to see her? We can go now." Ellie hesitated, sudden fear washing over her. What if she doesn't want to see me? What if she hates me? I've rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but now? Now it's real, Alexander finished for her. He signaled for the check. "Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." The simple promise, from a stranger who had inexplicably inserted himself into her life, brought unexpected comfort. Ellie nodded, gathering her courage along with her old backpack. "I'm ready," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. No one could truly be ready for such a moment. But sometimes, readiness mattered less than the willingness to step forward anyway into the unknown territory of reconciliation and truth. Lily stood outside the coffee shop, her thumb hovering over the call button, when a text message appeared below the first. "Your mother would like to see you. A car can bring you to her, or she can come to you. Your choice." The formality of the message was jarring, as if her mother had suddenly acquired a personal assistant. None of this aligned with the Ellie Morgan she knew, a woman whose life had been chaotic at best, destructive at worst. Lily had spent years in therapy learning to separate herself from that chaos, to build boundaries that protected her hard-won stability. And yet, her fingers moved before her mind fully committed to a decision. "I'm on break for the next 10 minutes. Coffee shop on level 2 north side." She pressed send, then immediately regretted it. 10 minutes wasn't enough time for a reunion 3 years in the making, but perhaps that was the point, limiting the damage, containing the potential fallout. She could always walk away when her break ended. In the sleek black Audi heading back toward the mall, Ellie read her daughter's response aloud, her voice quavering. 10 minutes, Alexander noted, checking his watch. "We can be there in 7. "It's not enough time," Ellie whispered, panic rising. "What can I possibly say in 10 minutes that would make any difference, that would make up for everything I've done?" "Perhaps making up for it isn't the point of this first meeting," Alexander suggested gently. "Perhaps it's just about reconnection, opening a door that's been closed for too long." Ellie clutched her backpack tighter. "I've written her so many letters," she said. "Hundreds of them. I never sent any because I never had an address, or because I was too ashamed, or too high." She took a shuddering breath. "And now I have 10 minutes and I can't remember a single word I wanted to say." Alexander studied her profile, the fine lines around her eyes, the tension in her jaw. In the space of a few hours, this woman had transformed from a desperate stranger to someone whose pain he felt as acutely as if it were his own. The sensation was as unfamiliar as it was powerful. "Tell her the truth," he said finally. "No rehearsed speech, no carefully crafted apology. Just the truth of how you feel seeing her again." The car pulled up to the mall's north entrance. Ellie froze, her hand on the door handle. "I can't do this," she whispered. "You can," Alexander assured her. "I'll be right beside you." She turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "You're coming with me? Why would you do that? This isn't your family drama." A fair question, one for which he had no logical answer. By all rights, he should be across town in a boardroom, discussing quarterly projections with his executive team. He should be calling his fiancée to smooth over his inexplicable behavior. He should be doing anything but involving himself further in this stranger's life. Yet the thought of returning to his carefully structured existence felt unbearable in the face of this raw, unscripted human moment. "I'd like to be there," he said simply, "if you'll allow it." Ellie studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Together, they entered the mall, Alexander's security team creating a discreet perimeter around them as they made their way to the second floor. Lily paced outside the coffee shop, checking her watch every few seconds. 8 minutes of her break remained. Each passing moment ratcheted her anxiety higher. What would her mother look like after 3 years? The last time she'd seen Ellie, she'd been gaunt, her once beautiful face ravaged by addiction, her eyes holding that desperate, shifty look that Lily had come to associate with an imminent relapse. A commotion near the escalators drew her attention. A small group of well-dressed men moved purposefully through the mall crowds, surrounding 2 figures. As they approached, Lily's breath caught in her throat. The woman in the navy dress couldn't possibly be her mother. This woman's hair was styled in a modern cut that framed her face elegantly. Her posture was straight, her movements steady. Yet as she drew closer, there was no mistaking those eyes. Ellie's eyes, now clear and alert, fixed on Lily with a mixture of hope and terror. More shocking still was the man at her side, a face Lily recognized instantly from magazine covers and tech blogs. Alexander Reed, the billionaire from the morning's commotion, was escorting her mother through the mall as if they were old friends. "Lily," Ellie breathed, stopping a few feet away, visibly restraining herself from rushing forward. "Mom?" Lily couldn't keep the confusion from her voice. "What? How?" She gestured vaguely at Ellie's transformation, at the security detail, at Alexander Reed standing silently supportive at her mother's side. "It's a long story," Ellie said, her voice stronger than Lily remembered. "Longer than your 10-minute break. How did you find me?" "I overheard someone mention you worked here. I've been looking—" Ellie swallowed hard. "I've been looking for you for a long time." The practiced speeches, the imagined recriminations Lily had rehearsed over the years, all evaporated in the reality of her mother standing before her, somehow both changed and achingly familiar. "You look—" Lily struggled to find the right words. "Different." A small, sad smile touched Ellie's lips. "Clean. The word you're looking for is clean. 6 months now." She reached up to touch her styled hair self-consciously. "The clothes and the hair, that's all new. Today, actually. But the sobriety, that's been day by day for a while now. 6 months." Lily let that sink in. The longest her mother had managed before had been 47 days. Lily had counted each one, waiting for the inevitable fall. "Congratulations," she said, the word feeling inadequate. An awkward silence fell between them, 3 years of separation creating a chasm too wide to bridge in a brief mall encounter. Alexander, who had been standing quietly to the side, stepped forward. "Ms. Morgan," he said, extending his hand to Lily. "Alexander Reed. I apologize for the intrusion, but I've had the pleasure of meeting your mother today under unusual circumstances." Lily shook his hand automatically, her mind struggling to process this surreal scenario. "You're the one from the news, the ribbon cutting." He nodded, a wry smile touching his lips. "I seem to have caused quite a stir this morning." "Because of my mom?" Lily couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. "It's complicated," Alexander admitted. "But sometimes the most meaningful connections occur when we least expect them." Ellie, who had been watching this exchange with nervous eyes, suddenly reached for her backpack. "Lily, I brought something for you. I've been writing these for years, never thinking I'd actually get to give them to you." She pulled out a worn notebook, its pages stuffed with loose sheets, some on proper stationery, others on napkins or torn scraps. "They're letters. To you. Things I wanted to tell you but couldn't." Lily stared at the notebook, not reaching for it. "I have to get back to work," she said, her voice tight. "My break is almost over." "Oh." Ellie's hand, still extending the notebook, trembled slightly before she pulled it back. "Of course, I understand." "When do you finish today?" Alexander asked Lily, his tone casual but his eyes intent. "5," Lily answered automatically, then immediately wondered why she'd told him. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation then? Dinner, perhaps? Somewhere more private than a mall corridor?" Lily looked between them, the billionaire and her mother, an alliance that made no sense in any world she understood. "I don't think—" "Please," Ellie interrupted, the word catching in her throat. "Just dinner. If you hate every minute, you never have to see me again. I promise." The raw hope in her mother's eyes made Lily's chest ache with a familiar pain. The pain of wanting to believe, of having believed too many times before. "Fine," she said finally. "One dinner, but I need to understand what's happening here." She gestured between Ellie and Alexander. "All of this." "We'll explain everything," Alexander assured her. "My driver can pick you up here at 5. Lily nodded stiffly, then checked her watch. "I have to go." As she turned to leave, Ellie called after her. "Lily, thank you for giving me these minutes." Something in her mother's voice, a clarity, a presence that had been absent for so much of Lily's life, made her pause. 10 minutes isn't much after 3 years. "It's more than I deserved," Ellie replied softly. Watching her daughter disappear back into the coffee shop, Ellie felt her knees weaken. Alexander's hand appeared at her elbow, steadying her. "She agreed to dinner," he said quietly. "That's a start." "Why are you doing this?" Ellie asked, turning to face him fully. "Getting involved in my mess? You don't know me. You don't know Lily. None of this affects your life." Alexander considered the question, aware that his security team was maintaining a perimeter around them, that shoppers were sneaking photos with their phones, that somewhere his PR team was probably having collective heart failure. "For most of my adult life," he said slowly, "I've lived inside a bubble of wealth and privilege. Every interaction I have is filtered through that lens, what people want from me, what I can leverage from them. Even my relationships are transactions." He paused, his gaze drifting to the coffee shop where Lily had disappeared. "But when you held on to me this morning, there was no agenda. It was just human. And I realized how rarely I experience that anymore." "So I'm your ticket back to humanity?" Ellie's tone wasn't accusatory, merely curious. "Perhaps we're helping each other find our way back to something genuine," he suggested. "You to your daughter, me to whatever exists beyond spreadsheets and strategic planning." As they made their way back to the car, Alexander's phone, which he'd finally turned back on, buzzed incessantly with messages and missed calls. One name appeared more frequently than others: Diane. His fiancée's latest text was succinct. "What the hell, Alexander? My father is furious. Call me immediately." He silenced the phone without responding, a decision that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. The Alexander Reed of yesterday would have immediately launched into damage control, smoothing ruffled feathers, reassuring investors, placating his future father-in-law. Today, sitting beside a formerly homeless woman who clutched a notebook full of unsent letters to her estranged daughter, none of those concerns seemed to matter. "We have a few hours before dinner," he said to Ellie. "Is there anywhere you'd like to go? Anything you need?" Ellie considered the question seriously. "Somewhere quiet," she said finally, "where I can think about what to say to Lily. And maybe—" She hesitated, then continued with more confidence. maybe you could tell me more about yourself. Not the version from magazine covers, the real Alexander Reed." It was such a simple request, yet it struck him as profound. When was the last time anyone had asked about the real Alexander rather than the CEO, the investor, the eligible bachelor? "I think I can manage that," he said with a smile that felt more genuine than any he'd given in years. As the car pulled away from the mall, Alexander made a decision. He opened his phone and sent a brief email to his executive assistant. "Cancel all appointments for the remainder of the week. Family emergency." It wasn't entirely a lie. Somewhere in this city, a family was in the process of healing a wound that had festered for years. He wasn't part of that family, had no right to involve himself in their drama. And yet, as he glanced at Ellie's profile, her eyes fixed on the city passing outside the window, her hands still clutching the notebook of letters, he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Alexander's penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the vast expanse of water like living art. Ellie stood before the glass, mesmerized by the view and the surreal turn her life had taken in the span of a few hours. This morning, she'd been huddled in a shelter doorway, calculating how to stretch her meager resources through another day. Now she stood in a billionaire's home, wearing clothes that cost more than she'd earned in the past year, preparing to reunite with the daughter she'd thought lost to her forever. "Tea?" Alexander offered, setting down a tray with an elegant porcelain set. Ellie turned from the window, studying him. In the privacy of his home, Alexander Reed seemed different. The corporate polish softened, the calculated charm replaced by something more hesitant, almost awkward. "Thank you," she said, settling into one of the minimalist chairs that probably cost more than most cars. "Nice place." A smile ghosted across his face at the understatement. It came with the job. The interior designer had very strong opinions about creating a space that reflected the Reed Innovations aesthetic. "I'm not entirely sure what that means, but apparently it involves a lot of chrome and very little color." "It's beautiful," Ellie said, "but it doesn't feel lived in." Alexander's smile faded. "No, I suppose it doesn't." He poured the tea with practiced precision. "I'm rarely here, to be honest. Between the office, business travel, and appearances at various functions, this place is more storage unit than home." "No family photos," Ellie observed, glancing around. "No personal touches. I keep a few things in my bedroom. My mother's wedding ring, a picture of my parents, an old baseball my father gave me." He handed her a cup of tea. "The public spaces remain curated." "Like your life," Ellie said, the observation slipping out before she could censor it. Instead of taking offense, Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "Precisely like my life." He settled into the chair opposite her. "You're remarkably perceptive for someone who just met me." "When you live on the streets, you learn to read people quickly," Ellie said, warming her hands on the teacup. "Survival skill. Who's safe, who's dangerous, who might help, who will definitely hurt. You develop a sixth sense." "And what does that sixth sense tell you about me?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious. Ellie considered him over the rim of her cup. "That you're lonely. That you have everything and nothing at the same time. That you're searching for something you can't quite name." She paused. "That you're kind, but you've forgotten how to show it without an agenda attached." The assessment, delivered without judgment or accusation, left Alexander momentarily speechless. In boardrooms and business negotiations, he was renowned for his ability to read others while revealing nothing of himself. Yet this woman, with no formal education and none of his advantages, had seen through his carefully constructed facade with unnerving accuracy. "That's," he began, then stopped, reconsidering. "Yes, to all of it." "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," Ellie said, setting down her cup. "You didn't," he assured her. "It's refreshing, actually. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear." "I've lost the luxury of sugarcoating things," Ellie replied with a shrug. Too many wasted years saying what felt good instead of what was true. Alexander leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me about those years, if you don't mind. Ellie's gaze drifted back to the lake, its surface now catching the afternoon sun in dazzling patterns. There's not much to tell that isn't depressingly familiar. I was a single mother at 19, worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, started taking pills for a back injury, then stronger pills, then whatever I could get. Her voice remained steady, as if recounting someone else's life. Lily grew up watching me spiral. By the time she was 16, she was the parent and I was the child. She got herself through school, applied to colleges, built a life, all while I was falling apart. When did you lose touch with her? 3 years ago, after my 4th failed rehab attempt. Ellie's fingers traced the delicate pattern on the teacup. She'd just gotten the assistant manager job at the coffee shop. She told me she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't watch me destroy myself, couldn't keep picking up the pieces, said she needed to focus on her own life. And that's when you started writing the letters, Alexander guessed, nodding toward the notebook that sat on the coffee table between them. Yes, at first they were angry, blaming her for abandoning me. Ellie's lips curved in a self-deprecating smile. Addiction warps your thinking that way, makes you the victim in your own story, even when you're the one causing all the damage. What changed? I nearly died, she said matter-of-factly. Overdosed in a public bathroom. Someone found me, called 911. I woke up in the hospital with a second chance I didn't deserve. Started writing different kinds of letters after that. And the sobriety? 6 months, you said? Ellie nodded. 1 day at a time. I found a free clinic with a counselor who didn't give up on me. Got into a transitional housing program for a while, but lost my spot when funding was cut. Been on the streets since then, but kept going to meetings, kept working with my counselor, kept writing to Lily, even with no way to send the letters. Alexander was quiet for a moment, absorbing her story. You're remarkably strong, he said finally. A short laugh escaped her. Strong? I destroyed my life, hurt my daughter, and ended up homeless. That's not strength. You survived, he countered. You got clean without resources, without support. You kept looking for your daughter even when there seemed to be no hope of reconciliation. That's strength, Ellie. She looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. What about you? What's the real story of Alexander Reed? The version that doesn't make it into the press releases? It was his turn to gaze out at the lake, gathering thoughts he rarely articulated even to himself. I was a nerdy kid with a gift for coding and a father with impossibly high standards. Created my first commercially viable program at 16. Built Reed Innovations in college instead of going to parties or dating or doing any of the normal things kids do. And now you have an empire, Ellie observed. An empire built on innovative technology that connects people worldwide, he recited, the words coming out like a practiced mission statement. Then his tone shifted, became more personal. Meanwhile, I can't remember the last time I had a genuine connection with another human being. What about your fiancé? Ellie asked, remembering his earlier mention of an engagement. Alexander's expression closed slightly. Diane and I have an understanding. Our relationship works on paper. She gets the prestige of being married to a tech CEO. I get the stability of a partnership with someone who understands the demands of my position. Her father is our largest investor. The merger makes sense. Merger, Ellie repeated, raising an eyebrow. Not marriage? A Freudian slip, perhaps. He smiled without humor. The truth is, I proposed because it was expected, because my board approved, because the timing aligned with our 5-year growth strategy. Diane accepted for similar reasons. Neither of us harbors any illusions about grand passion. That sounds incredibly lonely, Ellie said softly. It's efficient, Alexander corrected, but the hollow note in his voice betrayed him. Or at least, it was until this morning, when a homeless woman hugged me in the middle of a mall and made me question every choice I've made for the past decade. The simple honesty of his statement hung in the air between them, neither awkward nor weighted, just true. For several minutes they sat in comfortable silence, watching the play of light on the lake, two strangers bound by an inexplicable connection that defied logical explanation. Finally, Alexander glanced at his watch. "We should start getting ready for dinner. I've made reservations at a private dining room, somewhere Lily will feel comfortable but where we won't be disturbed." "I'm nervous," Ellie admitted, setting down her empty cup. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if she decides I'm not worth the effort?" "Just be honest with her," Alexander advised, rising from his chair. "The same way you've been with me. No pretense, no performative apologies, just the truth." As Ellie headed toward the guest room where she'd freshened up earlier, she paused. "Alexander, thank you, not just for the clothes and the dinner and finding Lily, but for listening, for seeing me as a person, not just a problem." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a relaxation of the careful control he maintained. "Perhaps we're seeing each other," he said quietly. "When was the last time anyone really saw you, Ellie?" The question followed her into the guest room, echoing in her mind as she prepared for the dinner that might determine the future of her relationship with her daughter. When had anyone last seen her? Not the addict, not the homeless woman, not the failure, but simply Ellie. She couldn't remember. At precisely 5:15, Alexander's driver pulled up outside the mall's north entrance. Lily stood waiting, having changed from her coffee shop uniform into jeans and a simple blouse. She'd debated not showing up at all, had crafted and deleted a cancellation text a dozen times during her shift. Yet here she was, sliding into the back seat of a luxury car to have dinner with the mother who had broken her heart countless times, and a billionaire who had no business being involved in their family drama. "Ms. Morgan," the driver greeted her. "Mr. Reed and your mother are already at the restaurant. We'll be there in approximately 15 minutes. Lily nodded, too overwhelmed to respond verbally. The car's interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne. The privacy partition was raised, giving her space to collect her thoughts. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. "Are you really having dinner with that tech billionaire from the news? There are pictures of you talking to him at the mall all over Twitter." Lily groaned, turning off her phone. Of course there were pictures. Of course this bizarre situation would have a social media component. Nothing in her life prepared her for this intersection of private family drama and public spectacle. The restaurant was an understated but elegant establishment in Lincoln Park, its brick exterior giving no hint of the Michelin-starred cuisine served within. The driver escorted Lily through a private entrance, bypassing the main dining room to a secluded space in the back. When the door opened, Lily's step faltered. Her mother sat at a round table, her posture straight, but her hands fidgeting nervously with the edge of a napkin. Beside her, Alexander Reed looked remarkably different from his media appearances, more approachable, less polished, somehow more human. Both rose as she entered. For a moment, the three stood in awkward tableau, the weight of expectations and history filling the space between them. "Lily," Ellie said, her voice wavering slightly. "You came." "I said I would," Lily replied, her tone more defensive than she'd intended. Alexander stepped forward, breaking the tension. "Thank you for joining us, Lily. Please, sit wherever you're comfortable." Lily chose a seat that placed her equidistant from both of them, a physical manifestation of her emotional position, neither fully engaged nor completely detached. A server appeared immediately, offering water and wine. Lily accepted a glass of red, needing something to steady her nerves. "How was the rest of your shift?" Ellie asked, an innocuous question that somehow carried the weight of 3 years of absence. "Fine," Lily said. Then, making an effort, "Busy. There was a lot of talk about what happened this morning." She glanced at Alexander. "You're trending on Twitter." A wry smile touched his lips. "So my PR team has informed me, repeatedly, in increasingly panicked tones." "Are you going to tell me what actually happened?" Lily asked, looking between them. How my mother ended up with... She gestured vaguely at Ellie's transformation. All this? And why one of the richest men in America is sitting at this table? Ellie and Alexander exchanged a glance, a silent communication that sparked an unexpected flare of jealousy in Lily's chest. They had clearly formed some kind of connection in the hours since their strange meeting. "It's a bit of a long story," Alexander began. "I have time," Lily said, settling back in her chair, wine glass in hand like a shield. "I'm not going anywhere until I understand exactly what's happening here." Ellie's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Under her daughter's steady gaze, the confidence she'd built throughout the day began to crumble. How could she possibly explain the bizarre chain of events that had led them here without sounding completely unhinged? "I was looking for you," she began simply. "I heard someone at the shelter mention a manager named Lily at a coffee shop in the mall. I'd been trying to find you for so long." Her voice caught. "Anyway, I went there this morning, but security kept watching me. I was trying to avoid them when I got caught in a crowd and literally crashed into Alexander." Alexander picked up the thread. "There was a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new Reed Innovation Center. I was supposed to give a speech, meet with investors, the usual corporate pageantry." He smiled slightly. "Instead, your mother and I had what you might call a moment of unexpected connection." Lily's skeptical expression didn't waver. "A connection?" "It sounds strange," Ellie acknowledged. "It was strange. But when we accidentally embraced, something happened. I can't explain it. It was like..." She searched for words. "Like recognizing something familiar in a complete stranger," Alexander finished. "Something genuine in a world that often feels artificial." "So you just decided to cancel your big corporate event and whisk my homeless mother away for a makeover and reunion?" Lily asked, her tone hovering between disbelief and accusation. "Why? What do you get out of this?" The question hung in the air, direct and uncomfortable. Ellie tensed, waiting for Alexander's response. It was the question she herself had been dancing around all day. What possible motive could this wealthy, powerful man have for inserting himself into their fractured family story? Alexander set down his fork, considering Lily with the same thoughtful attention he'd given Ellie earlier. "That's a fair question. The truthful answer might sound either trite or unbelievable, but here it is. I get to feel human again." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My life is constructed around profit margins and market share. Every relationship, every interaction is filtered through the lens of strategic advantage. Even my engagement is essentially a business arrangement beneficial to both parties." A hint of bitterness crept into his voice. "When your mother held on to me this morning, there was no agenda, no calculation. It was just real, and I realized how rarely I experience that anymore." "So my mother is your authenticity project?" Lily asked, not unkindly, but with unmistakable skepticism. "I prefer to think of it as a moment of clarity," Alexander replied, "a reminder that there's more to life than quarterly reports and shareholder value." Ellie watched the exchange with a mixture of anxiety and wonder. Her daughter had grown into a perceptive, direct woman who didn't shy away from difficult questions. Pride mingled with regret. Pride in the person Lily had become. Regret for all the moments she'd missed. "I understand how strange this must seem," Ellie said softly. "Believe me, no one is more surprised than I am. But finding you was all that mattered to me. Alexander helped make that possible." Lily's expression softened slightly, but wariness remained in her eyes. "You said you've been sober 6 months?" "Yes." Ellie straightened, meeting her daughter's gaze directly. "One day at a time." "I've heard that before," Lily said, the words carrying the weight of a dozen broken promises. "I know." Ellie accepted the implicit accusation without defense. "You have no reason to believe me. I wouldn't, in your position. But it's different this time." "Different how?" "Because I hit bottom. True bottom. Not the kind I thought was bottom all those other times." Ellie's voice remained steady despite the pain of the memories. I overdosed in a public bathroom. Someone found me, called 911. I woke up in the hospital with the realization that I was going to die alone, having ruined the one relationship that actually mattered. She paused. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving this world without at least trying to make amends to you. Lily looked down at her plate, her composure wavering for the first time. I checked the hospitals, she said quietly. After I told you I couldn't do it anymore. For months I called emergency rooms, rehab centers, shelters. No one had seen you. I thought you were dead. The revelation struck Ellie like a physical blow. All this time she'd imagined Lily relieved to be free of her burden, moving forward without a backward glance. The thought that her daughter had searched for her, had worried and grieved, added a new layer of shame to her already considerable regret. I was using a different name, Ellie admitted. Jane Taylor. I thought it would be easier to start over if I wasn't Ellie Morgan anymore. Easier for who? Lily asked, a flash of the old hurt surfacing. For me, Ellie acknowledged. It was selfish, like so many of my choices. Alexander, who had been listening quietly to this exchange, signaled discreetly to the server to refill their wine glasses, giving mother and daughter space for their painful reconnection. I have something for you, Ellie said, reaching for her backpack, which she'd insisted on bringing despite Alexander's assurance that it would be safe at his penthouse. I've been writing these for 3 years, one nearly every day. She placed the worn notebook on the table between them. They start out pretty dark, self-pitying, angry, but they change over time. I change. If you want to understand what happened after we lost touch, it's all in there. Lily stared at the notebook but didn't reach for it. I don't know if I can read that, she said honestly. It was hard enough building a life without you. Opening all that up again. I understand, Ellie said, pushing the notebook gently toward her daughter. But if you ever want to, it's yours. No pressure, no expectations. The simple offer, a history without demands attached, seemed to reach Lily in a way that explanations and apologies couldn't. She hesitantly placed her hand on the notebook, then pulled it closer. I'll think about it, she said, a tiny concession that nevertheless filled Ellie with cautious hope. The server arrived with their main courses, providing a welcome pause in the emotional intensity. As they began to eat, Alexander guided the conversation towards safer territory, asking Lily about her work, her interests, her dreams for the future. Gradually, Lily's rigid posture relaxed. She spoke of her promotion to assistant manager, her online business classes, her hope of opening her own cafe someday. Ellie listened intently, storing away each detail like precious gems, building a picture of the woman her daughter had become in her absence. You always did make the best hot chocolate, Ellie said when Lily mentioned her signature drink at the coffee shop. Even when you were 12, you had that special recipe. Lily looked up, surprised. You remember that? Of course I do, Ellie said softly. I remember everything from when I was actually present. It's the lost years I can't get back. Something shifted in Lily's expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I still use the same recipe, she admitted. Customers ask for it specifically. I'd love to try it sometime, Ellie said, the casual suggestion heavy with implication, a hope for future meetings, for a continuing relationship. Lily didn't commit, but she didn't refuse either. Instead, she turned to Alexander. So what happens after tonight? You go back to your tech empire and billion-dollar deals, and my mom goes, where exactly? The question brought them abruptly back to practical reality. In the emotional intensity of the reunion, none of them had addressed the fundamental issue of Ellie's circumstances. Despite her transformation, she was still essentially homeless, with minimal resources and uncertain prospects. Alexander set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. I've been considering that question throughout the day, he said. With Ellie's permission, I'd like to offer some assistance with housing and employment. Ellie's head snapped up. What kind of assistance? I own several properties in the city, Alexander explained. One of them is a small apartment building in Lincoln Park that houses some of our visiting researchers and executives. There's a vacant unit that could be yours for as long as you need it. I can't accept that, Ellie protested immediately. It's too much. Consider it rent-controlled, Alexander suggested. You can pay what you're able as you get back on your feet. And the employment part? Lily asked, her tone protective rather than accusatory. Reed Innovations has a foundation that supports various social initiatives, Alexander said. We're currently expanding our recovery and reintegration programs for people rebuilding their lives after addiction. Someone with Ellie's experience could provide valuable insight as a consultant. Ellie stared at him, overwhelmed. You're offering me a job? And an apartment? You barely know me. I know enough, Alexander said simply. I know you're determined, resilient, and insightful. I know you've fought your way back from circumstances that would have broken many people. Those are exactly the qualities we need in this initiative. Lily studied Alexander with renewed intensity. Why are you really doing this? And please don't say it's to feel human again. No one gives away apartments and creates jobs for strangers without an ulterior motive. Instead of being offended by her directness, Alexander seemed to appreciate it. Your skepticism is warranted, he acknowledged. I admit that part of my motivation is selfish. Today has been the most genuine experience I've had in years. The thought of returning to my carefully constructed life, to board meetings and strategic partnerships and my engagement of convenience. He shook his head. I'm not ready for this connection to end. Connection, Lily repeated, looking between them. With my mother. With both of you, if you'll allow it, Alexander clarified. I'd like to see where this unexpected friendship leads. No pressure, no expectations, just the possibility of something authentic in a life that has become increasingly artificial. The candor of his response seemed to surprise even him. Ellie, watching his face, recognized the expression of someone speaking a truth they hadn't fully admitted even to themselves until the words were spoken aloud. I don't need charity, she said finally, and I won't be anyone's project. It's not charity, Alexander assured her. The apartment would be compensation as part of your employment. The job is legitimate. We genuinely need someone with lived experience to help shape our programs. Lily, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. It sounds like a real opportunity, Mom. The word Mom, used for the first time that evening, hung in the air between them, significant and tender. A chance to build something stable. I'd have to earn it, Ellie said, more to herself than to them. Really contribute, not just take. That's exactly what I'm proposing, Alexander confirmed. A mutually beneficial arrangement. You gain stability while offering valuable perspective to our foundation. Ellie looked between them. Her daughter, cautiously opening a door that had been closed for years, and this enigmatic billionaire who had inexplicably upended his carefully constructed life to help a stranger. The offer was almost too perfect, too miraculous to be trusted. I need time to think about it, she said finally. This is all happening so fast. Of course, Alexander agreed immediately. There's no rush. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Lily checked her watch, surprise crossing her face. It's almost 9. We've been here for hours. Indeed, the restaurant had emptied around them, the staff discreetly maintaining their privacy. What had begun as a tense, awkward reunion had evolved into a genuine conversation, not without pain or difficulty, but with moments of connection that had seemed impossible just that morning. I should get home, Lily said, gathering her purse and, after a moment's hesitation, the notebook of letters. I have an early shift tomorrow. I'll have my driver take you, Alexander offered. As they prepared to leave, Ellie found herself facing the question that had hovered at the edges of her consciousness throughout the evening. Where would she go tonight? Back to the shelter, to Alexander's penthouse. The uncertainty must have shown on her face. "There's a hotel suite reserved for you," Alexander said quietly. "Just for tonight, while you consider the apartment offer. No pressure, no expectations." Lily, overhearing this, gave Alexander an appraising look. Then, in a gesture that brought unexpected tears to Ellie's eyes, she stepped forward and briefly, awkwardly, hugged her mother. "I'll call you tomorrow," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "We can talk more." It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a fragile bridge across the chasm that had separated them for 3 long years. As they walked together toward the exit, 3 strangers connected by an improbable twist of fate, Ellie felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Alexander stood at the window of his office, gazing out at the Chicago skyline without really seeing it. 2 weeks had passed since that fateful day at the mall, and his life had been irrevocably altered, though not in ways visible to the outside world. To his board, his employees, even to Diane, he appeared to be the same Alexander Reed, focused, decisive, in command. Only he knew the extent of the transformation taking place within. "Your 3 o'clock is waiting," Vanessa announced from the doorway. "The foundation team is prepared for your input on the new initiatives." "Thank you," he replied, turning from the window. "And Diane?" "She's confirmed for dinner tonight. I've made reservations at Alinea as requested." Alexander nodded, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. He'd been avoiding Diane since the incident at the mall, offering plausible excuses about urgent business matters. Tonight, there would be no more delays. Decisions had to be made, truths spoken. In the conference room, his foundation's executive team had assembled alongside their newest consultant, Ellie Morgan. Alexander felt an involuntary smile form as he entered and saw her sitting there, dressed in a simple but elegant blouse and slacks, clothes she'd chosen herself, not the designer selections from that first day. "Mr. Reed," the foundation director greeted him, "we were just reviewing Ms. Morgan's initial recommendations for our recovery support programs." Ellie's transformation over the past 2 weeks had been remarkable, though not in the superficial way one might expect. Yes, she looked healthier, her face filling out slightly, her posture more confident, but the real change was in her eyes. The wary, haunted look had been replaced by something approaching peace. The small apartment Alexander had offered her had become a home, filled with second-hand furniture she'd selected herself and paid for with her first consultant's paycheck. "Ellie has provided invaluable insight," the director continued. "Her lived experience brings a perspective we've been missing." "I'm not surprised," Alexander said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "What specifically are we discussing today?" As the meeting progressed, Alexander found himself watching Ellie with quiet admiration. She spoke with authority, but without arrogance, her suggestions practical and grounded in the reality of addiction and recovery. The foundation team, initially skeptical of this unorthodox hire, now listened attentively, taking notes and asking thoughtful follow-up questions. "The biggest gap I see is in transitional support," Ellie was explaining. "People leave treatment programs with good intentions, but return to environments filled with the same triggers and pressures that led to their addiction in the first place. Without stable housing, employment, and community support, relapse becomes almost inevitable." "What do you propose?" Alexander asked, though he already knew the direction of her thinking. They'd discussed these issues during their frequent conversations over the past 2 weeks. Impromptu dinners, walks along the lakefront, quiet evenings in his penthouse where they talked for hours about everything and nothing. "A comprehensive aftercare program," Ellie replied. "Housing subsidies tied to continuing treatment participation, job training that leads to actual employment, not just resume workshops. Community integration through mentorship from others who've successfully navigated recovery." The foundation director nodded approvingly. "These are excellent suggestions, Ms. Morgan. Would you be willing to help us design the specifics of such a program?" "That's why I'm here," Ellie said with a small smile. As the meeting concluded, Alexander felt a curious mixture of pride and something more complex, a feeling he wasn't quite ready to name. He'd known Ellie for only 2 weeks, yet in that brief time, she'd become essential to him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. "Dinner tonight?" he asked as they walked together toward the elevator. It had become something of a routine, casual meals where they continued their seemingly endless conversation. "I can't," Ellie replied. "I'm having dinner with Lily." Alexander's disappointment was tempered by genuine pleasure. "That's wonderful. How are things progressing between you?" "Slowly," Ellie admitted. "We're taking baby steps. Tonight we're cooking dinner together at my place, something we used to do when she was younger, before—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. "Before the addiction took over. Before everything fell apart. She's giving me a chance," Ellie continued softly. "That's more than I dared hope for." "I'm happy for you," Alexander said sincerely. "Both of you." They reached the elevator, and an unexpected awkwardness fell between them. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd established no clear boundaries for their relationship. They weren't colleagues exactly, nor were they merely friends. Something undefined but significant had formed between them, a connection that defied conventional categorization. "I should let you go," Ellie said, breaking the silence. "You probably have a full schedule this afternoon." "Actually," Alexander replied, checking his watch, "I have dinner with Diane tonight. We need to talk." Understanding crossed Ellie's face. "About us? About whatever this is?" "Among other things," he admitted. "Things have been building for a while. What happened at the mall, meeting you, it was a catalyst, not the cause." Ellie studied him, her gaze direct in that way he'd come to value so highly. "Are you sure about that? 2 weeks ago you were engaged to be married, running your empire exactly as expected. Now you're questioning everything. Maybe this is just a phase, a temporary crisis that will pass." "Is that what you think?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "I think," Ellie said carefully, "that when people experience sudden clarity or connection, there's often a period of overcorrection, a pendulum swing from one extreme to another before finding balance." Alexander considered her words. "That's remarkably insightful." "I've had a lot of therapy," Ellie replied with a wry smile. "Talk to Diane. Figure out what's real and what's reaction. I'll be here, wherever here turns out to be." The elevator arrived and Ellie stepped inside. As the doors closed between them, Alexander felt a peculiar sense of loss, as if something precious was slipping away. He shook off the sensation. They would talk tomorrow, as they had every day since their fateful meeting. This undefined connection between them wasn't ending. It was merely evolving. Across town, in the small but charming apartment that was slowly becoming home, Ellie prepared for dinner with her daughter. She'd shopped carefully, selecting ingredients for Lily's favorite childhood meal, a simple pasta dish they'd often made together during the good times. As she chopped vegetables, Ellie's thoughts drifted to Alexander. Their relationship, if that was even the right word for it, defied simple explanation. They weren't romantic partners, yet there was an intimacy between them that transcended ordinary friendship. They'd shared confidences, vulnerabilities, hopes, and fears with a freedom that neither had experienced with anyone else. The doorbell interrupted her reflections. Wiping her hands on a dish towel, Ellie went to greet her daughter. Lily stood in the hallway, a bottle of wine in one hand and a cautious smile on her face. "I brought dessert too," she said, lifting a small bakery box. "From that place you used to like on Halstead." The thoughtful gesture, remembering a bakery Ellie had loved years ago, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "You remembered." "I remember everything," Lily said quietly, echoing Ellie's words from their dinner with Alexander 2 weeks earlier. In the kitchen, they fell into a familiar rhythm, Lily finishing the salad while Ellie attended to the pasta sauce. For fleeting moments, it felt like no time had passed, as if the years of addiction and separation had been nothing but a bad dream. Reality reasserted itself in the small pauses, the careful navigation of certain topics, the history that couldn't be erased but might with time and effort be reconciled. "So," Lily said as they sat down to eat, "tell me about Alexander Reed." Ellie nearly choked on her wine. "What about him?" "Mom." Lily gave her a pointed look. "The billionaire tech CEO who's suddenly become your personal champion? Who gave you an apartment and a job? Who looks at you like you're the most fascinating person he's ever met? That Alexander Reed?" "It's not what you're thinking," Ellie said, though she wasn't entirely sure what Lily was thinking. "We're friends. He's been incredibly kind, but there's nothing romantic between us." "Are you sure about that?" Lily asked, twirling pasta around her fork. "Because from where I'm sitting it looks like there could be. The question is whether that's a good idea for either of you." Ellie set down her fork, considering her daughter's words. "He's engaged, Lily, to someone appropriate, someone from his world. And yet he spends most of his free time with you," Lily observed. "I'm not judging, by the way. I'm concerned. For both of you." "You're concerned about Alexander Reed?" Ellie couldn't hide her surprise. "The billionaire?" "I'm concerned about two people who seem to be clinging to each other during major life transitions," Lily clarified. "You're 6 months sober, rebuilding your life from scratch. He's having some kind of existential crisis about his perfect-on-paper existence. That's a volatile combination." The assessment was so accurate that Ellie couldn't formulate an immediate response. When had her daughter become so perceptive, so wise? Perhaps Lily had always possessed these qualities and Ellie had been too lost in her own struggles to notice. "You're right," she admitted finally, "about all of it. But whatever's happening between Alexander and me, it's helping both of us. He's supporting my recovery, yes, but I'm helping him too, helping him see beyond the corporate machine he's built around himself." Lily's expression softened. "I can see that. Just be careful, okay? For your sake and his." "I will," Ellie promised. "And thank you for caring enough to worry." They ate in companionable silence for a moment before Lily spoke again. "I started reading your letters." Ellie's heart skipped a beat. "You did?" "Just the first few," Lily said. "They're hard to read, but I'm glad to have them." "I meant every word," Ellie said softly, "especially the apologies." "I know." Lily reached across the table and briefly squeezed her mother's hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact since their reunion. "That's why I'm here." At Alinea, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, Alexander sat across from Diane, watching as she expertly navigated the elaborate tasting menu. In her element among luxury and refinement, she was undeniably beautiful, poised, polished, perfect, and he felt nothing. "Your PR team has done an impressive job containing the mall incident," Diane was saying, delicately sampling a bite of the chef's latest creation. "Daddy was furious at first, but the narrative they've constructed about you connecting with the Foundation's mission is quite compelling. It might even boost our social responsibility profile." Alexander studied her face, searching for any sign that she cared about him as a person rather than a business asset. "Is that all that matters to you? How things look?" Diane set down her fork, her expression cooling. "What's gotten into you lately, Alexander? First the scene at the mall, then canceling our appearances at the Philharmonic Gala and the Tech Summit. Now you're questioning my priorities? We had an understanding." "Yes," he agreed quietly. "An understanding, not a relationship." Her eyes narrowed. "Is this about that woman? The homeless one from the mall? The board is concerned about how much time you're spending with her." "The board," Alexander repeated. "Or your father?" "Both," Diane admitted without apology. "You've built something extraordinary, Alexander. We cannot allow it to be derailed by some misguided savior complex or midlife crisis." "We," he echoed. "That's the problem, isn't it? There is no we, not really. There's Reed Innovations, There's your family's investment. There's our mutually beneficial arrangement. But there's no us, Diane. There never has been." Diane set down her napkin, her composure never wavering. "You're upset, perhaps overworked. We can discuss this when you're thinking more clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," Alexander said, reaching into his pocket for the velvet box that contained her engagement ring. He placed it on the table between them. "I can't marry you, Diane. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." For the briefest moment, something like genuine emotion flickered across her face. Not heartbreak, but perhaps surprise tinged with disappointment. Then her professional mask returned. "You realize what this means," she said, her voice low and controlled. "My father will divest from Reed Innovations. The board will question your judgment. The press will speculate wildly." "I know," Alexander acknowledged, "and I accept those consequences." Diane studied him for a long moment, then reached for the ring box. "She must be quite remarkable, this woman who's turned your life upside down in 2 weeks." "She is," Alexander agreed. "But this isn't about her, not entirely. It's about finally being honest with myself, and with you." As Diane gathered her things to leave, dignity intact but eyes cold with calculation, Alexander felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. Whatever complications lay ahead, with the board, with investors, with the press, they were worth facing for the chance to live authentically. His phone vibrated with a text message from Ellie. "How's dinner going? Are you okay?" Despite the tension of the moment, he smiled. In 2 weeks, Ellie Morgan had come to know him better than the woman he'd been engaged to for 8 months. As Diane walked away without a backward glance, Alexander typed a simple reply. "It's done. I'm free." Spring arrived in Chicago with its characteristic indecision, brilliant sunshine giving way to sudden downpours, warm breezes followed by sharp, chilling winds. 2 months had passed since the mall encounter, and the seasons weren't the only things in transition. Alexander sat in the boardroom maintaining his calm as Jonathan Whitcomb, Diane's father and, until recently, Reed Innovations' largest investor, finished his blistering address to the board. "In conclusion," Whitcomb said, his patrician features arranged in an expression of grave concern, "while I personally regret the necessity of withdrawing my investment, I cannot in good conscience continue to support a company whose CEO demonstrates such erratic judgment and questionable personal associations." The implied reference to Ellie hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Throughout the corporate corridors, whispers about Alexander's homeless woman had proliferated, despite PR's best efforts to reframe the relationship as a philanthropic connection. "Thank you for your candor, Jonathan," Alexander replied, his voice even, "and for your years of support. The board will certainly miss your insights." Before Whitcomb could respond, Alexander turned to the CFO. "David, please present the contingency financing we've arranged." David Mercer, a longtime ally on the board, smoothly took over, outlining the consortium of new investors Alexander had assembled in the 2 weeks since Diane had returned her engagement ring. The numbers were impressive, more than replacing Whitcomb's withdrawn capital and with fewer strings attached. As the presentation concluded, Alexander noticed the shift in the room. The board members who had been eyeing him with thinly veiled concern now looked thoughtful, even impressed. He had anticipated Whitcomb's move and countered it effectively, demonstrating that his personal choices would not derail the company. "If there's nothing else," Alexander said, rising from his chair, "I have a foundation meeting to attend." He left the boardroom with the confident stride that had become his trademark, saving his exhaustion for the privacy of his office. Vanessa was waiting with his schedule and a much-needed coffee. "The foundation team is ready in conference room C," she informed him, "and your father called again. That's the 3rd time this week." Alexander sighed. James Reed's disapproval of his broken engagement had manifested in increasingly frequent calls and thinly veiled lectures about responsibility and legacy. "I'll call him tonight," he promised, though the prospect held little appeal. Also, Vanessa added with carefully neutral professionalism, Ms. Morgan left a message. She wanted to reschedule your dinner to tomorrow as something came up with her daughter. At the mention of Ellie, Alexander felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. That's fine. Actually, it's perfect. I could use a quiet evening after today. Vanessa nodded, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts about her boss's unusual friendship with the former homeless woman who now consulted for their foundation. If she had opinions, and Alexander was certain she did, she kept them scrupulously professional. The foundation meeting proceeded efficiently, with Ellie presenting the pilot program she'd designed for transitional support of recovering addicts. Her confidence had grown exponentially over the past 2 months. She spoke with authority born of lived experience, her insights grounded in both personal knowledge and the research she'd immersed herself in since joining the foundation. The key innovation here, she explained, indicating a flow chart on the screen, is the integration of services, housing, employment, counseling, community support, all coordinated through a single case manager who stays with the participant throughout the process. Alexander watched with quiet pride as the foundation team engaged with her ideas, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than perfunctory politeness. Ellie had earned their respect through the quality of her work, not because of her connection to him. After the meeting, they walked together toward the elevator, maintaining the professional distance they'd established for workplace interactions. That went well, Alexander observed. The board has approved the full funding request for your pilot program. Really? Ellie's face lit up with genuine excitement. That's incredible. We can help so many people with this approach. You can help them, Alexander corrected. This is your vision, Ellie. I'm just providing the resources. The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside alone. As the doors closed, the careful professional distance between them dissolved. Ellie leaned against the wall, suddenly looking tired. Rough day? Alexander asked, noticing the shadows under her eyes. Just intense. Lily and I had a long talk last night about some of the harder parts of the past. It was good, necessary, but emotionally draining. She offered a small smile. That's why I had to reschedule dinner. She asked if we could continue the conversation tonight. Of course, Alexander said immediately. Family comes first. Always. The simple statement hung between them, layered with unspoken meaning. Over the past 2 months, their relationship had deepened in ways neither had anticipated. They'd fallen into a comfortable routine of shared meals, long conversations, and a growing physical awareness that neither had acted upon. Alexander was still processing the end of his engagement. Ellie was focused on rebuilding her relationship with Lily and strengthening her recovery. The timing wasn't right for romance, yet the potential hummed between them like a current. How was your board meeting? Ellie asked as the elevator descended. Whitcomb making trouble? Nothing I couldn't handle, Alexander assured her. The new investment consortium is solid. Reed Innovations will survive my scandalous decision to break off a loveless engagement. Ellie smiled at his dry tone, but concern remained in her eyes. And the other thing? The questionable personal associations I keep reading about in the business press? Alexander's expression hardened. Whitcomb can imply whatever he wants. You're a valued consultant to our foundation, implementing innovative programs that are already gaining national attention. Your work speaks for itself. But your reputation has never been better, Alexander interrupted. The authentic leadership narrative is resonating with both employees and customers. Our approval ratings are up 17%. Is that what I am to you? An authentic leadership narrative? Ellie's tone was light, but the question held genuine weight. The elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened, but neither moved to exit. You know better than that, Alexander said quietly. You know what you are to me. The simple statement, devoid of flowery declarations or dramatic gestures, nevertheless carried profound meaning. Ellie held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. I do know, she acknowledged. "I just worry sometimes that I've complicated your life in ways you never asked for." "I asked for exactly this," Alexander countered, finally stepping out of the elevator with Ellie beside him. "Not specifically you, I couldn't have imagined you, but for something real in a life that had become increasingly artificial. You didn't complicate my life, Ellie. You clarified it." They walked together through the lobby, nodding to security guards and receptionists who had grown accustomed to seeing them together. Outside, Alexander's driver waited at the curb. "Can I drop you somewhere?" he offered. Ellie shook her head. "I'm going to walk for a bit, clear my head before Lily comes over. But I'll see you tomorrow night?" "Looking forward to it," Alexander confirmed. They parted with the casual ease of people secure in their connection. No dramatic farewells necessary when tomorrow was a certainty. As his car pulled away, Alexander watched Ellie through the window, her figure growing smaller but remaining upright, strong, so different from the desperate woman he'd encountered in the mall just 2 months earlier. Across town, in the upscale apartment she shared with 2 roommates, Lily Morgan was preparing for another difficult conversation with her mother. The past 2 months had been a slow, sometimes painful process of reconciliation, trust cautiously rebuilt, wounds carefully examined, forgiveness offered in small, incremental pieces rather than all at once. The notebook of letters sat on her coffee table, its pages now familiar territory. She'd read them all, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always coming away with a deeper understanding of her mother's journey through addiction and recovery. "Heavy reading?" her roommate Jade asked, gesturing toward the notebook as she grabbed her purse. "It's my mom's," Lily explained. "Letters she wrote me during the years we were apart." Jade nodded, familiar with the broad outlines of Lily's complicated family situation. "How's that going? The reunion thing?" Lily considered the question seriously. "Better than I expected. Harder, too, in some ways. There's so much to work through." "And the billionaire?" Jade asked with a raised eyebrow. "Still in the picture?" The question made Lily smile despite herself. Alexander Reed's presence in their lives remained somewhat surreal, yet had gradually become a new normal. He was unfailingly respectful of her relationship with Ellie, never inserting himself where he wasn't invited, yet consistently supportive of both women in ways that went far beyond financial assistance. "He's still around," Lily confirmed. "Actually, he's been pretty great, not just with Mom, but with me too. He helped me connect with some business mentors for my cafe concept, completely separate from anything to do with Mom." "And they're still just friends?" Jade's skepticism was evident. "The billionaire and your mom?" "That's what they say," Lily replied, though she had her doubts. She'd seen the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. A mixture of admiration, affection, and something deeper that neither seemed ready to acknowledge. "Well, whatever they are," Jade said, heading for the door, "your mom seems good for him. My sister works in HR at Reed Innovations, and she says he's completely different now. More approachable, more human. People actually like working for him, not just respecting him from a distance." After Jade left, Lily considered her roommate's observation. It was true. Whatever was happening between Ellie and Alexander seemed beneficial to both. Her mother had blossomed with the stability of housing and meaningful work, while Alexander had shed some of the corporate armor he'd worn for so long. Yet Lily couldn't help worrying about the inevitable complications. Alexander Reed inhabited a world of wealth and privilege that remained fundamentally foreign to people like her and her mother. Sooner or later, that disparity would assert itself, wouldn't it? The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Ellie stood outside, looking both nervous and determined, the expression she wore for their deeper conversations. "I brought dinner," she said, holding up a bag from their favorite Thai restaurant. "Perfect," Lily replied, taking the bag. "I've been thinking about what we discussed last night." They settled at Lily's small dining table, the familiar ritual of sharing food creating a safe space for difficult conversation. As they ate, Lily finally asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Mom, What's really going on with you and Alexander? Ellie's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. We're friends, she said, the same answer she always gave. Just friends? Lily pressed. Ellie set down her chopsticks, considering her daughter thoughtfully. It's complicated, she admitted finally. There's something between us, something neither of us expected or looked for. But we're not rushing into anything. He's just ended his engagement, and I'm still rebuilding my life. The timing isn't right. And if it was? Lily asked. If the timing was right? A soft smile touched Ellie's lips, a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. Then I'd have to face the fact that I'm falling in love with a man so far out of my league that it defies all logic. The simple honesty of the admission surprised Lily. Do you really think he sees it that way? The league thing? No, Ellie acknowledged. Alexander doesn't think in those terms. But the rest of the world does, and eventually that would matter. Already, his business associates are questioning his judgment because of his association with me. That's their problem, Lily said with unexpected fierceness. Not yours, and not his. Ellie reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. When did you become so wise and protective? I've always been wise, Lily replied with a small smile. You just weren't always sober enough to notice. The comment might once have cut like a knife, but now it was simply truth. Acknowledged, accepted, part of their shared history rather than a weapon. I've missed so much, Ellie said softly. So many years I can never get back. We're making new memories now, Lily reminded her. Better ones. They ate in companionable silence for a moment before Lily spoke again. For what it's worth, I think you should tell him how you feel. Life's too short for the timing isn't right. Is that your professional opinion as my daughter? Ellie asked with a wry smile. As your daughter who wants you to be happy, Lily corrected. Whatever form that happiness takes. The simple acceptance, the permission to pursue her own joy after so many years of struggle, brought unexpected tears to Ellie's eyes. Of all the gifts her recovery had brought, her daughter's forgiveness was the most precious, the most undeserved, and the most transformative. I'll think about it, she promised, wiping away a stray tear. But for now, let's focus on us. There's still so much healing to do here. Lily nodded, understanding that some journeys couldn't be rushed, that some bridges had to be rebuilt slowly, one plank at a time. As they continued their meal, sharing memories both painful and precious, mother and daughter continued the delicate work of reconciliation, not erasing the past, but creating a future where it no longer defined them. You're sure about this? Alexander asked, his voice betraying more nervousness than he'd intended. It's not too much? Ellie surveyed the rooftop garden of his penthouse, transformed for the evening into an intimate celebration space. Strings of golden lights created a warm glow against the darkening sky. A small table had been set for three, elegant but not ostentatious, overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. It's perfect, she assured him. Lily will love it. Today marked 6 months since their chance encounter at the mall, a milestone neither had planned to commemorate until Lily suggested a celebration dinner. You might as well admit it's an anniversary of sorts, she'd said with the gentle teasing that had become part of their healing relationship. After all, how many life-changing hugs happen in shopping malls? Now, as Alexander adjusted a place setting for the third time, Ellie was struck by how much had changed in half a year. The impeccably polished CEO, who had once approached every interaction as a strategic exercise, had given way to someone more authentic, still brilliant and driven, but also capable of genuine vulnerability, of connection without calculation. You're staring, Alexander noted, glancing up to catch her watching him. Just appreciating the view, Ellie replied with a smile. He straightened, abandoning his fussing with the table. I'm nervous, he admitted. I want tonight to be special for both of you. It already is, Ellie said simply. You didn't have to do all this. Alexander moved closer, his hand finding hers in a gesture that had become natural over the months. I wanted to. This day changed everything for me, for us. The unspoken question that had hovered between them for months seemed suddenly more present, more demanding of an answer. What exactly were they to each other? Friends, certainly. Confidants, without question. But the current that ran beneath their relationship had only strengthened with time, despite their mutual agreement to move slowly. The elevator chimed, announcing Lily's arrival and temporarily postponing the conversation they both knew was coming. Alexander stepped back, his professional composure reasserting itself as the doors opened. "Wow," Lily said, taking in the transformed rooftop. "When you said dinner at Alexander's, I wasn't expecting all this." "Blame your host," Ellie said, moving to embrace her daughter. "He doesn't seem to understand the concept of keeping it simple." "I heard that," Alexander called from where he was opening a bottle of wine, non-alcoholic for Ellie, a consideration that had become second nature to him. Lily hugged her mother, then approached Alexander with the ease of familiarity that had developed between them. Over the past months, he had become something between a mentor and a friend to her, supporting her business plans for an independent cafe, introducing her to industry contacts, even helping her secure a small business loan that was based entirely on her own merit rather than his influence. "It's beautiful," she told him, accepting a glass of wine. "But Mom's right. You do tend toward the extravagant." "I prefer thoughtfully comprehensive," he replied with mock seriousness. Their easy banter, the comfortable way they moved around each other, it was a family dynamic that none of them had anticipated but all had come to value. As they settled at the table, the conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic. Lily's progress toward opening her cafe, Ellie's expanding role at the foundation, the latest developments at Reed Innovations. "The Recovery Housing Initiative is expanding to 3 more cities," Ellie announced, pride evident in her voice. "The preliminary results from our Chicago pilot have exceeded all projections." "That's your program, right?" Lily asked. "The integrated support model?" "It's all her," Alexander confirmed. "The foundation board is amazed by the outcomes. 92% of participants are still sober after 6 months, with 78% in stable employment." "Those are just numbers," Ellie demurred, though her eyes shone with quiet satisfaction. "The real success is in individual stories, people rebuilding their lives, reconnecting with their families. Like us," Lily said softly. A moment of grateful acknowledgement passed between mother and daughter, no longer defined by past wounds but by the healing they'd accomplished together. "I have some news too," Lily continued, setting down her glass. "I've signed the lease for the cafe space. We're aiming for a November opening." "That's wonderful," Ellie exclaimed. "The location on Armitage?" Lily nodded. "It's perfect, just the right size, great foot traffic, and close enough to the L that commuters can stop in." "This calls for a toast," Alexander said, raising his glass, "to new beginnings in all their forms." As they clinked glasses, Ellie felt a wave of gratitude so intense it momentarily overwhelmed her. A year ago she had been sleeping in shelters, her sobriety tenuous, her daughter lost to her, her future a void of hopelessness. Now she sat beneath the stars with the 2 people who had become the center of her reconstructed life, celebrating achievements that once seemed impossible. "I have something for both of you," Alexander said after they finished the main course. He disappeared briefly, returning with 2 small, elegantly wrapped packages. "Alexander," Ellie protested, "you didn't need to—" "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Please." Lily opened hers first, gasping softly as she lifted a vintage brass key from its box. "Is this—" "The original key to your cafe building," Alexander confirmed. "The property manager found it during renovations. I had it mounted for you, a symbol of the door you're opening to your future." Lily ran her finger over the antique key, now mounted on a simple wooden plaque engraved with the date of her lease signing. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you." Ellie opened her package more slowly, somehow knowing that whatever lay inside would carry even deeper significance. Nestled in tissue paper was a small snow globe, inside which stood a miniature replica of the mall where they had met. "Turn it over," Alexander instructed softly. On the base was an inscription. "The moment everything changed. Thank you for seeing me." Ellie looked up, finding Alexander's eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The simple gift acknowledged what they both knew but had never fully articulated, that their chance encounter had been a pivot point, a dividing line between before and after. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he assured her. "I just wanted you to know that I remember. Not just what happened, but what it meant." Lily, watching this exchange with knowing eyes, set down her gift. "I think I'll help myself to more dessert," she said, moving discreetly toward the buffet table at the far end of the rooftop, giving them a moment of privacy. In her absence, Alexander reached across the table, taking Ellie's hand in his. "6 months ago, you crashed into my life and woke me from a kind of sleepwalking existence. Every day since then has been more real, more meaningful because you're in it." Ellie's heart hammered in her chest. They stood at the threshold of something significant, a boundary they had approached but never crossed. "Alexander," she began, her voice unsteady, "what we have, this friendship, this connection, it means everything to me. But I can't help wondering if we're heading somewhere that might be complicated." "Life is complicated," he replied simply. "That doesn't mean we shouldn't live it fully." "You know what I mean," Ellie persisted. "You're Alexander Reed. I'm a recovering addict who was homeless 6 months ago. The world will have opinions about that." "Let them," Alexander said with unexpected fierceness. "I've spent my entire adult life making decisions based on what others expect. The board, the shareholders, my father. For once I want to choose based on what I feel, what I know to be right." "And what is that?" Ellie asked, barely breathing. "That I'm falling in love with you," he said, the words both a declaration and a relief. "That I have been for months, that whatever comes next I want to face it with you." The confession hung in the air between them, at once terrifying and exhilarating. Ellie had known this moment was approaching, had felt it in every lingering glance, every conversation that stretched into the early hours, every casual touch that carried currents of something deeper. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of how I feel. I've known for a while that I'm in love with you too. I'm scared of what it might do to you, to your life." "My life has never been better than it is right now," Alexander countered. "Reed Innovations is thriving. The foundation is doing meaningful work. I wake up each morning with purpose beyond profit margins. And so much of that is because of you, because you showed me what matters." From the far end of the rooftop, Lily pretended intense interest in the dessert selection, though she was clearly monitoring the conversation from a discreet distance. Ellie caught her daughter's eye, receiving a small nod of encouragement in return. "I need you to be sure," Ellie said, turning back to Alexander. "Not just tonight in this beautiful moment, but tomorrow and next week and next year. Because I can't go backward. I've worked too hard for my recovery, for my relationship with Lily." "I've never been more certain of anything," Alexander replied without hesitation. "I love you, Ellie Morgan. The real you. Not some idealized version or a project to be fixed. Just you, exactly as you are." The simple truth of his words, delivered without grand gestures or flowery declarations, reached something deep within her. This was Alexander, direct, sincere, seeing her with a clarity that both honored her strength and acknowledged her vulnerability. "In that case," Ellie said, her voice steadying as certainty replaced doubt, "I love you too, and I'm ready to see where this leads us." The tension that had built between them over months of careful restraint finally broke. Alexander leaned across the table, one hand gently cradling her face as he kissed her, a kiss that felt like both a beginning and a homecoming. A discreet cough interrupted them. "So," Lily said, returning to the table with deliberate nonchalance, "I guess we're officially celebrating two things tonight?" Ellie laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to float upward into the night sky. "I guess we are." "About time," Lily remarked, raising her glass in another toast, "to the most unlikely love story I've ever witnessed. The billionaire and the homeless woman who literally crashed into his life. I prefer to think of it as the story of two people who saw each other when no one else was really looking," Alexander corrected gently, his eyes never leaving Ellie's face. As the night deepened around them, the Chicago skyline a glittering backdrop to their celebration, Ellie felt the final pieces of her new life falling into place. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold challenges. Recovery was a daily commitment, relationships required constant nurturing, and the world would indeed have opinions about their unconventional union. But for perhaps the first time since childhood, she faced the future without fear, surrounded by love that had been earned rather than demanded, supported by connections that strengthened rather than depleted her. 6 months ago, a desperate embrace in a crowded mall had changed everything. Tonight, under the stars, that moment of accidental connection had blossomed into something neither of them could have imagined, a love born of authenticity, nurtured by mutual respect, and powerful enough to transform them both. The headline in the Chicago Tribune's business section was understated but clear. Riyadh Innovations CEO confirms relationship with foundation consultant. Below it, a photograph showed Alexander and Ellie at a charity gala the previous weekend, their first official public appearance as a couple. The article itself was surprisingly balanced, focusing primarily on Ellie's professional contributions to the Reed Foundation's recovery initiatives, with only a brief mention of her personal history with addiction and homelessness. "Could have been worse," Lily observed, setting down the newspaper on the counter of her newly opened cafe. The space was still in its soft opening phase, not yet officially unveiled to the public, but already drawing a steady stream of neighborhood regulars. At least they highlighted Mom's work instead of just calling her the homeless woman from the mall incident. Alexander, sitting across from her with a cup of the house specialty coffee, nodded. "My PR team has been working overtime, but honestly, your mother's accomplishments speak for themselves. The recovery housing program is getting national attention." "How's she handling the publicity?" Lily asked, wiping down the counter with the focused attention to detail that characterized everything about her business. "Better than I expected," Alexander admitted. "There's a strength in her that still surprises me sometimes. After everything she's been through, a few tabloid headlines don't seem to faze her much. She's had worse things written about her than Billionaire's unlikely romance," Lily agreed with a wry smile. "Where is she this morning anyway?" "Meeting with the governor's task force on addiction recovery. They're looking at implementing her program model statewide." Pride was evident in Alexander's voice, not the pride of a benefactor watching a charity case succeed, but the deeper pride of a partner witnessing the full flowering of talents long buried by circumstance. In the 3 months since their relationship had officially begun, he had watched Ellie step fully into her capabilities, her past struggles becoming not a liability, but a source of hard-won wisdom that informed her work. "Mom was always smart," Lily said, seeming to read his thoughts. "Before the addiction took over, she was the one all the neighbors came to for advice, the one who could organize anything and make it work. That part of her didn't disappear, it just got buried for a while." Alexander nodded, understanding. In the 9 months since their fateful meeting, he'd come to know the many facets of Ellie Morgan. Her intelligence, her resilience, her capacity for joy despite everything she'd endured. Each layer revealed only deepened his love for her. "How are things on the board front?" Lily asked, changing the subject. "Any more resistance to the relationship?" Alexander's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Jonathan Whitcomb is still doing his best to undermine me, but it's becoming increasingly difficult for him. Our stock is up 27% since I broke off the engagement with Diane. The new investment consortium is solid, and the foundation's work is generating the kind of positive press you can't buy. So basically, you're too successful for them to touch you, Lily summarized with satisfaction. For now, Alexander acknowledged. But corporate politics are never simple. There will always be those who see your mother as a liability rather than the asset she truly is. And how does that make you feel? Lily asked, her gaze direct in a way that reminded him of Ellie. In the months since their initial awkward reunion, Alexander and Lily had developed their own relationship. Not quite father-daughter, more than merely friends, a unique connection based on their mutual love for Ellie and growing respect for each other. Honestly? Alexander considered the question seriously. It makes me reassess what matters. A year ago, board approval and shareholder perception were everything to me. Now, he shrugged. They're factors to consider, but not defining ones. Your mother has helped me understand the difference. Lily smiled, satisfaction evident in her expression. Good answer. The bell above the door chimed as a new customer entered. Lily's eyes widened slightly as she recognized James Reed, Alexander's father, standing somewhat uncertainly in the entrance of the modest cafe. "Dad?" Alexander said, rising from his stool with surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Your assistant said I might find you here," James replied, his gaze taking in the small but tastefully designed space. "I was hoping we could talk." Lily, intuiting the need for privacy, gestured toward a quiet corner table. "You're welcome to use that space. Can I get you anything, Mr. Reed?" James appeared momentarily taken aback by the young woman's direct address. "Black coffee? Thank you, Ms. Morgan?" Lily supplied. "Lily Morgan." Recognition dawned in the older man's eyes. "Ah, you're Ellie's daughter." "I am," Lily confirmed without elaboration, her tone pleasant but reserved. She'd heard enough about James Reed's disapproval of her mother to maintain a certain wariness. As Lily prepared the coffee, Alexander led his father to the indicated table. Their relationship had been strained since the broken engagement, their interactions limited to necessary business matters, with James making his disappointment clear at every opportunity. "This is a nice establishment," James said, settling into his chair. "Quite different from your usual haunts." "Lily has created something special here," Alexander replied. "Her business plan was impeccable, her market research thorough. She's going to succeed on her own merits." James nodded, accepting the coffee Lily delivered with a murmured thanks. When she had returned to her post behind the counter, he turned his attention fully to his son. "I've been unfair to you," he said without preamble. "And by extension, to Ellie. I came to apologize." Alexander, who had been prepared for another lecture on responsibility and appearances, found himself momentarily speechless. In all his adult life, he could not recall his father ever apologizing to him. "What brought this on?" he finally managed. James sighed, looking suddenly older than his 70 years. "Several things. The quarterly reports, for one. The company is thriving under your leadership, despite my concerns about your personal choices. The foundation's success, for another. I've been following the press about the Recovery Housing Initiative. Impressive work." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "But mainly, it was something your mother said to me last night. She reminded me that I didn't build Reed Innovations by following others' expectations. I did it by trusting my instincts, even when conventional wisdom said I was wrong." Alexander waited, sensing there was more to come. "I watched you with Diane," James continued. "The perfect match on paper. But there was never any spark, any real connection. With Ellie." He shook his head slightly. "Even I can see the difference. You're more yourself with her than I've ever seen you with anyone." "I am," Alexander confirmed simply. "She doesn't care about my position or my wealth. She sees me, the actual person behind the CEO title." "Your mother wants to meet her," James said. "Properly, not just the brief introduction at that foundation event. She suggested dinner at the house next weekend." The invitation, unexpected and significant, hung in the air between them. Alexander knew what it represented, not just acceptance, but a genuine attempt at welcoming Ellie into the family. "I'll talk to Ellie," he promised. "But Dad, you should know, she's not going to try to impress you or Mom. What you see is who she is." "That's what I'm counting on," James replied with a small smile. "I've had enough of strategic alliances disguised as relationships. I'd like to get to know the woman who's made my son happier than I've ever seen him." As they continued talking, their conversation shifting to business matters and family news, Lily observed from her position behind the counter. The tension that had been evident in Alexander's posture when his father arrived had gradually eased. Whatever was happening between them appeared to be healing rather than widening the rift. When James finally rose to leave, he approached the counter, addressing Lily directly. "Thank you for the coffee, Ms. Morgan, and congratulations on your business. It takes courage to build something of your own." "Thank you," Lily replied, somewhat surprised by the genuine warmth in his tone. "I hope we'll be seeing more of you as well," James added. "Family dinners should include all family, shouldn't they?" The simple inclusion, acknowledging her place in Alexander's life through her mother, touched Lily more deeply than she had expected. "I'd like that," she said honestly. After James had departed, Alexander returned to the counter, a bemused expression on his face. "That was unexpected." "Seems like you're not the only Reed capable of growth and change," Lily observed with a smile. "Apparently not," Alexander agreed, "though I suspect my mother had a hand in it. She's been after me for months to bring Ellie for a proper visit." "Are you going to accept the dinner invitation?" Alexander nodded. "If Ellie is comfortable with it, it's a big step." "Speaking of big steps," Lily said, her tone deliberately casual, "when are you going to ask her to move in with you? That penthouse is ridiculously empty with just you rattling around in it, and she practically lives there already." The question, though presented lightly, touched on something Alexander had been considering for weeks. "Actually, I've been thinking about something more significant than moving in together." Lily's eyebrows rose. "Seriously? You're going to propose?" "I'm considering it," Alexander admitted. "But I wanted to talk to you first." The simple statement, acknowledging her place in Ellie's life, her right to be consulted on matters that would affect their newly rebuilt relationship, meant more to Lily than any grand gesture could have. "You don't need my permission," she said, though her voice betrayed her emotion. "Not permission," Alexander corrected gently. "Your blessing, your insight. You know your mother better than anyone. Is she ready for this step? Are we?" Lily considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Mom has changed so much since you came into her life. Not because you fixed her, she was already on that path, but because you've given her space to become who she was always meant to be. And she's done the same for you." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "A year ago, I would have said it was too soon, too risky. But now? I've watched how you are together, how you lift each other up, how you face challenges as a team." A smile touched her lips. "So yes, you have my blessing. But don't rush it. Make sure the moment is right." "I was thinking Christmas," Alexander said. "Simple, private, just the three of us." "She'd like that," Lily agreed. "No grand public gestures, nothing that feels like a spectacle." As they continued discussing possibilities, a comfortable warmth filled the small cafe. The warmth of family planning for a future together, of bridges built where once there had been only chasms of misunderstanding and pain. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, dusting Chicago's streets with delicate crystals that transformed the ordinary into something magical. Inside Lily's cafe, among the rich aromas of coffee and freshly baked bread, another kind of transformation was taking place. the quiet alchemy of broken lives reassembling into something stronger and more beautiful than before. 9 months earlier, a desperate woman had crashed into a billionaire's carefully orchestrated life, setting in motion changes neither could have anticipated. Now, as winter settled over the city, they stood on the threshold of a new chapter, not as CEO and consultant, not as billionaire and former homeless woman, but simply as two people who had found in each other something authentic in a world too often defined by appearances. Snow fell in gentle flurries outside the windows of Lily's cafe, now closed to the public for a private Christmas Eve gathering. Inside, warmth radiated from more than just the crackling fireplace in the corner. The space had been transformed with subtle holiday decorations, pine branches and white lights, the scent of cinnamon and cloves hanging in the air. "Everything looks beautiful," Ellie said, adjusting a centerpiece on one of the small tables. "You've created something truly special here, Lily." Her daughter smiled, the pride of ownership evident in her expression. 6 months after opening, the cafe had exceeded even her ambitious business projections. The intimate space had quickly become a neighborhood favorite, known for both exceptional coffee and the warm atmosphere that seemed to invite genuine connection among patrons. "I had good advisors," Lily acknowledged, glancing toward Alexander, who was carefully hanging a final strand of lights along the back wall. "I merely provided resources," he countered. "The vision was entirely yours." It was true. Though Alexander had helped with the initial business loan and introduced Lily to industry contacts, the cafe's success stemmed from her own creativity and determination. The menu featured innovative coffee blends alongside simple, beautifully prepared food. The decor balanced modern elegance with welcoming comfort. Most importantly, Lily had created a space that reflected her own journey, a place where brokenness could be acknowledged but not defined by, where healing happened in community rather than isolation. "Is that the last of it?" Ellie asked, surveying the room with satisfaction. "Your grandparents will be here soon." The casual reference to James and Eleanor Reed as grandparents no longer felt strange on her tongue. Over the past 3 months, the senior Reeds had become an unexpected but welcome presence in their lives. Eleanor, warm and unpretentious despite her wealth, had taken an immediate liking to both Ellie and Lily. James, initially more reserved, had gradually revealed a dry wit and genuine interest in getting to know the women who had so transformed his son's life. "Almost done," Alexander confirmed, stepping back to admire his handiwork. "Though I still think we should have hired professionals for this." Ellie laughed, the sound as light and joyful as the snow outside. "And miss watching the great Alexander Reed balanced on a stepladder with a tangle of Christmas lights? Never." The teasing held the easy intimacy of a relationship built on genuine understanding. In the year since their first meeting, they had constructed something rare, a partnership of equals despite their vastly different backgrounds, a love that acknowledged their individual wounds while celebrating their shared healing. "Besides," Lily added, "tonight should be just us, family." The word hung in the air, simple yet profound. Family, not by blood or obligation, but by choice and commitment. A year ago, all three had been isolated in their own ways. Ellie by addiction and homelessness, Alexander by wealth and expectation, Lily by the protective walls built through years of disappointment. Now they moved around each other with the comfortable rhythm of people who had found home in one another's presence. The door chimed as James and Eleanor Reed arrived, bringing with them carefully wrapped packages and the crisp scent of winter air. "Merry Christmas, dears," Eleanor called, embracing Ellie warmly before moving to Lily. Unlike her husband, Eleanor had required no period of adjustment to accept the new women in her son's life. From their first meeting, she had approached them with open-hearted welcome, grateful for the changes she saw in Alexander. "The place looks wonderful, Lily," James said, looking around appreciatively. "Business going well?" "Better than projected," Lily confirmed, taking their coats. "We're adding a part-time baker next month to keep up with demand for the pastries." Excellent news. James nodded with genuine interest. His initial reservations about his son's relationship with Ellie had gradually given way to respect as he witnessed not only her positive influence on Alexander, but her own professional accomplishments. The recovery housing program she had developed for the Reed Foundation was now being implemented in 6 states, drawing acclaim from addiction specialists nationwide. They settled around the largest table, where Lily had arranged a simple but elegant dinner. Conversation flowed easily as they enjoyed the meal, discussions of business ventures and foundation projects interspersed with more personal exchanges and gentle teasing. To an outside observer, they might have appeared to be any close-knit family celebrating the holiday together, the differences in their backgrounds and experiences overshadowed by genuine affection. After dinner, they moved to the comfortable seating area near the fireplace. Eleanor insisted on helping Lily with coffee and dessert, leaving Ellie, Alexander, and James by the fire. "I have some news," James said, his expression unusually tentative. "I wanted to share it with both of you before making it public." Alexander raised an eyebrow, accustomed to his father's direct approach to business matters. "What is it, Dad?" "I've decided to step down as chairman of the board," James announced, "effective next quarter." "What?" Alexander straightened in his chair. "Why? Is everything all right?" "Everything is excellent," James assured him. "The company has never been stronger, which is precisely why it's the right time for me to step aside." He glanced at Ellie with a small smile. "Someone very wise recently reminded me that there's more to life than corporate accomplishments. I'd like to explore that while Eleanor and I still have good years ahead of us." Ellie returned his smile, recognizing her own words from a recent conversation with her future father-in-law. During a foundation event, they had found themselves discussing the delicate balance between ambition and personal fulfillment, a topic on which Ellie had hard-earned wisdom. "Who will take your place?" Alexander asked, still processing the unexpected news. "The board will need to vote, of course," James replied, "but I've recommended Marianne Chen." Alexander nodded slowly, seeing the wisdom in the choice. Marianne, a longtime board member known for her strategic brilliance and ethical leadership, would provide valuable continuity while bringing fresh perspective to the position. "She'll be excellent," he agreed, "but the board meetings won't be the same without you, Dad." "I'll still be available for consultation," James assured him. "But it's time for a new chapter. Your mother has a list of places she's wanted to visit for decades, and I'd like to be more involved with the foundation's work." He glanced at Ellie. "If you'll have me, that is." "We'd be honored," Ellie said sincerely, touched by his interest in the work that had become her passion. As Lily and Eleanor returned with coffee and a beautifully presented chocolate dessert, Alexander caught Ellie's eye across the room. A silent communication passed between them, a question asked and answered without words. It was time. "Before dessert," Alexander said, standing as the others settled back into their seats, "there's something I'd like to say." He moved to stand beside Ellie, taking her hand as she rose to join him. Lily's eyes widened slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had kept Alexander's confidence perfectly in the weeks since their conversation at the cafe, never hinting to her mother about what might be coming. "A year ago," Alexander began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "my life was perfect on paper and empty in reality. I had success, wealth, influence, everything except what truly matters. Then a chance encounter in a crowded mall changed everything." He turned to face Ellie fully, taking both her hands in his. "You crashed into me, literally and figuratively, and woke me from a kind of sleepwalking existence. You showed me what real courage looks like, what authentic connection feels like. You helped me rediscover my humanity when I was in danger of losing it entirely." Ellie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her gaze remained steady on his face. Around them, the others sat in attentive silence, witnesses to a moment that had been building since that first unexpected embrace. "I love you, Ellie Morgan," Alexander continued, "not despite your past, but including it. Every struggle, every triumph, every step of the journey that made you who you are. The woman who faces each day with honesty and courage. The woman who transformed pain into purpose. The woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small box. Inside nestled a ring that perfectly captured their relationship, not an ostentatious display of wealth, but a thoughtfully chosen design that honored both simplicity and significance. A single diamond set in platinum, flanked by smaller stones in a pattern that suggested strength emerging from pressure. "Will you marry me?" Alexander asked, the question stripped of pretense or calculation. Just a man asking the woman he loved to build a life with him. Ellie's smile bloomed through her tears. "Yes," she said simply. "With all my heart. Yes." As Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, the small gathering erupted in quiet celebration. Eleanor wiping away tears, James nodding with approval, Lily moving forward to embrace them both. "I knew it," Lily said, hugging her mother tightly before turning to Alexander. "Welcome to the family. Officially." "Thank you," Alexander replied, the words carrying deeper meaning than the simple phrase could convey. "Thank you for your blessing. Thank you for allowing me into your relationship with your mother. Thank you for your trust." As they settled back around the fire to enjoy dessert, the conversation turned naturally to future plans, not just for the wedding, which both Ellie and Alexander wanted to keep intimate and meaningful, but for the life they would build together. "We've been talking about expanding the foundation's work," Ellie explained, her hand finding Alexander's as she spoke. "Not just addiction recovery, but addressing the systemic issues that contribute to homelessness and poverty. And Lily's cafe concept has potential for growth," Alexander added. "Not as a chain, that would lose the personal touch that makes it special, but as a model for community-centered businesses." James listened thoughtfully, his expression reflecting newfound respect for his son's vision, a vision now enriched by considerations beyond mere profit and expansion. "You know," he said finally, "when I built Reed Innovations, I thought I was creating a legacy of technological advancement. I never imagined its greatest impact might come through the foundation's work." "Different kinds of innovation," Eleanor observed with quiet wisdom. "Both valuable, both necessary." As the evening progressed, snow continued to fall outside, transforming Chicago's urban landscape into a glistening wonderland. Inside the cafe, warmth and connection created a different kind of transformation. The ongoing alchemy of broken pieces reassembled into something stronger and more beautiful than before. 1 year after a desperate woman had accidentally embraced a billionaire in a crowded mall, they sat surrounded by family, their futures intertwined in ways neither could have imagined that day. What had begun as a moment of human connection in an increasingly disconnected world had blossomed into something profound. A love story, yes, but also a story of redemption, of second chances, of finding authentic purpose in an often artificial world. In the soft glow of firelight and Christmas decorations, Ellie looked around at the faces of her newfound family, her daughter, now thriving in her own right, her future husband, whose love had helped her believe in possibilities again, his parents, who had opened their hearts to accept her past while celebrating her present. In their eyes, she saw not the homeless addict she had been, but the woman she had become, strong, purposeful, worthy of love. The journey had not been easy. There had been struggles and setbacks, painful truths to face, difficult growth to navigate. Yet sitting here, her daughter's creation surrounding them, her fiancé's hand warm in hers, Ellie felt a sense of rightness that transcended circumstance. Sometimes, she reflected as Alexander squeezed her hand gently, the most profound changes begin with the simplest human connections. even an accidental embrace in a crowded mall at Christmas. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.